As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. I mentioned I had a sort of second piece of bad news, so I want to get the bad news out of the way because then we've got some really fun stories here. But this is another head scratcher for me, and maybe the answer is simple, maybe it's very tinfoil, maybe it's really complicated. But the headline here is TSM's social media following has seen a 30 million decline in the last 6 months. So TSM in August of last year had 80 million followers across all their platforms. And as of, I guess, today, or in the February 3rd, which is the date of the article, their combined social following dropped to 49 million, which is a decline of nearly 30 million followers.
Wow.
I'm not going to scroll down because the article does have a couple of theories on why this might be. I'm curious why you guys think this might be. And you know, Lindsay, maybe start with you in terms of thoughts on this.
Whenever I see a decline this large, and I can't think of any huge news stories to accompany it, like really, you know, like Activision Blizzard style news stories is what I mean. Just really ugly, bad news kind of stuff. I tend to think that they probably had a lot of fake followers, which isn't good either. Because honestly, there's kind of a once you follow someone, it's kind of sticky. I don't feel like a lot of people who start following, particularly celebrities, go back in later and specifically unfollow them. It's actually almost harder to do that. You have to kind of actively realize that you're following them and go to their profile and unfollow them. And I don't think it's likely that 30 million people did that. That's a huge number. If it had been like 1 million, I would have said something happened within the community and a bunch of people left. But I tend to think that this means that they had a lot of fake followers, which is also just really unfortunate for them, because if part of a huge portion of their following isn't real, that's not very attractive to sponsors and partners either. So I suppose it's good news that they haven't had any major scandals that I can think of that were really earth-shattering, but it's also bad news that you're seeing this huge decline, because it makes me wonder how much of who's left is actually real.
There was a negative story about their CEO, right, in workplace harassment that came out last week, but that doesn't amount to 30 million followers.
Well,
that amounts to, like you said, maybe a million.
Well, TSM Doublelift, if you remember, right, the big League of Legends player who used to be with TSM, in November came out and said, you know, he was very critical of the team. He was very critical of the CEO. He said it was like kind of a toxic work environment.
But
people aren't gonna unfollow because of that, I don't think.
Maybe just his followers that overlap, so you're capped at whatever his following is, because those people are more loyal to him. Maybe I mean, the botted thing resonates. Did that article say if it was just on their official accounts? That had to be across their content creators as well, right?
Across the content. So Jimmy, you bring up a good point. Someone left. Yeah. So Myth didn't resign with TSM.
A lot of people that left.
Yeah. Myth had 20 million followers. So that explains 20 of the 30 million, you could argue, right?
And what was the time frame for this, Paul? Because I remember they lost Daquan, they lost Hamlins. That was maybe 2 years ago. But
this is just from August till today.
Oh, okay. So that's irrelevant. But Myth is massive.
So Jane says TSM had some pretty ugly bad news. Yeah, they had, you know, in Lindsay's defense, right? It wasn't as big as the Activision Blizzard story, right? Like it definitely didn't make that level of news. And if we buy the idea that that Myth leaving took 20 million followers out,
right?
There's still huge. 10 million, right? And 10 million feels like a big number to be leaving over bad news. Bjergsen left. That's actually true, Jane. That's a Bjergsen gave up an ownership stake in the team to leave. Interesting. I'd be curious I don't know what his following is. It's not mentioned actually in this article. But it is a huge decline. I guess I'm curious. The second question I have for you guys on this is, does this affect TSM's ability to monetize, or have the brands now of these big orgs sort of outgrown the base numbers, right? Like whether TSM has 50 million or 80 million, do any sponsors you think care at this point? Or is it just being associated with the TSM brand is what they're really all looking for?
I think it's a bigger deal that 30 million left and that so many creators are now leaving and all of that. And like, I didn't realize that they had so many people lost. I mean, that's huge. And to me, 50 million is still a huge number. If you're looking at sponsorships, it's obviously not as good as 80, but it's concerning that 30 million people left. If they had always had 50, it would be different. Because I don't think it's necessarily about the number.
If it's just the one, they let the one guy leave, like we're making it sound like people are unfollowing the team account. It's like,
well, hold on.
Yeah, I totally thought that's what you meant.
Yeah, like it's like if, I'm struggling for an analogy, but like if the Jets like cut their quarterback and then all of a sudden you're like, well, he's no longer on the team. Like he's no longer on the team. Of course, his followers, it was like in that equation. I'm explaining this so poorly.
Yeah, but it's like even traditional sports teams I don't think sell advertising like that, right? I don't think they go, hey, if we look at the following of all our players, this is our total social following, right? That feels like kind of an esports thing more than anything. And maybe that was because the stars were so important, right, to the following. The question is, does TSM now, the brand, can it is it bigger than any size following because of talent? I'm saying this badly, but
no, I totally get what you're saying when you made the analogy to sports. I do wonder if we've gotten to a point in esports where I think early on, like the contracts were negotiated where it was like the teams would basically own all sponsorships that the players were doing. Like a lot of these contracts were written very unfairly to the players, I believe. And a lot of them didn't have agents. So it was like, hey, you have your social followings, you have to post, and it's like property of the teams. Whereas clearly, in the NFL, when Tom Brady puts up a post, it has nothing to do with the Buccaneers. That's Tom Brady and his agent. I think we're getting to the point in esports where that is probably the case now. And I think 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, that was not the case. So I think that's kind of the question you're asking. And I do think that is the case.
Yeah, I'd like to revise my stance on this a little bit, having now way more information. I think, like Jeff said, it is completely different when you have talent leaving to go spawn off their own thing, and it is kind of divorced from the idea of the team. The thing that's concerning to me is how many high-powered people left, and the fact that someone actually even gave up ownership to leave, and then they came out afterwards and said, actually, we hated working there. If I'm looking at this from a brand or from a sponsorship or from a partnership perspective, and I'm seeing, okay, wow, all these high-powered people left, and it wasn't just so that they could leave and go do their own thing. It was partially because of that, but this wasn't like a happy ending for them. Now this team has lost 30 million followers. And on top of that, there's the problems with the workplace. All of that combined doesn't paint a pretty picture for TSM. I think each of those things individually are kind of explainable, but altogether, that's not an awesome thing to be selling to people. And I definitely thought you meant like the official team account lost 30 million followers, and I was kind of floored that they had 80 million in the first place. So I also no longer think it's a bots issue. It's like, holy cow.
Well, to be fair, there is a percentage, like Tom says. It says that their official branded accounts dropped only 1%, which is more reasonable. That's true. But 1% of millions and millions is still a pretty sizable amount. It's not insignificant.